Greetings and felicitations.
Hip hip hurrah, tally ho.
Hello, my little Georgia Peach.
Hey, Puddin'.
All right, let's talk about Frankenstein. It was directed by James Whale, produced by Carl Laemmle Jr., screenplay by Garrett Fort, Francis Edward Farrow, story by Richard Slayer, based on the classic novel by Mary Shelley, starring Colin Clive, Mae Clark, John Bowles, Boris Karloff. Distributed by Universal Pictures. The release date, November 21st, 1931. It ran 71 minutes long. The budget, only $262,000. The box office, a whopping $12 million. What'd you think about this not horror film?
It was actually a good movie.
It was fantastic. This is one of my all-time favorite of the Universal horror films. I say not horror film because the horror genre wasn't noted as such until 1934. This came out in 1931, so we could see this is one of the early pieces of that Universal was doing to build up this classic line of horror films. Technically, it's considered science fiction.
And it is, because it is about creating a living being or bringing back the dead.
If we look at Mary Shelley's original book, which I highly recommend anyone who watches the movies go to the original source material, the book is very similar, but the liberties that the movie took made this creature iconic. Because the book is simply a series of human body parts that are stitched together. There's no understanding of how the body was animated, whereas the movie adds to the mythos. We know that in the movie, it was lightning that created the creature's animation. Also, the look of the creature, what we see now, that whenever we think of Frankenstein's monster, with the flat head, the green skin, the overly baggy suit, the sunken-in cheeks, the sunken-in cheeks actually were developed by Boris Karloff by taking out his partial, that is his dentures. But the entire look of the creature, we have to give credit to Jack Pierce. I mean, what did you think about the makeup job on this?
The makeup was incredible, even though, now, of course, this movie was in black and white, but you could still tell yes, he looked scary. It was just a great piece of makeup and prosthetics. And yet, to see it in the movie, of course, you get a much better feel for it than just reading it in a book. Like, now you have this visual, the way he looks, and of course the way he moved in the movie was, another iconic thing about the monster.
Yeah, you gotta figure the boots that he was wearing were 13 pounds each.
So he kind of had to walk the way he walked in the movie.
Yes. I thought that was a stroke of genius, forcing the actor to be more cumbersome based on what he was wearing. I can't stress enough how awesome this look is in comparison to the book. As much as I love the book, but do you think that the creature would be as menacing if he looked just like a normal human that was stitched together?
No, not menacing as much. Since this movie focused on how the monster is different, so you wanted him to look different.
Yes.
Instead of being a human or someone who looked human but acted different. That's another story.
And we've seen other versions of Frankenstein. And that is to note that this creature is not called Frankenstein in the movie. Later on, he would be labeled Frankenstein.
And that's sort of a misconception because Frankenstein was the doctor, the one who created him. So
yes.
The monster is usually called Frankenstein's monster, but then the monster became known as Frankenstein.
Yes, and in the book, it's Victor Frankenstein, but in the movie, he's called Henry Frankenstein. It's because the producers thought that American audiences viewed Victor as too evil of a name. Strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like they had to strategically pick the names. There was a character named Victor in the movie, but it just wasn't the doctor. And this movie was made or released right after Dracula, which was a big success. And so they were really pushing for this film to come out.
And the casting. We talk about the casting. I mean, I think the casting of Dracula was wonderful with Bela Lugosi. Boris Karloff, he was spotted in the commissary. And Boris Karloff relates later on that he actually thought it was strange because he was well dressed. And he thought he looked fairly handsome in the suit that he was wearing. And to find out that he was spotted in the commissary to portray a monster, he was kind of taken back by it. But no matter what, these two would end up being giants in the Universal horror film industry.
Wow, so that had to be a big, what would you call it, a big thing for Boris Karloff to do. Yeah, he didn't think he was that suited to play a monster, but it could have been more because he was such a big guy.
Now, what'd you think about the scene with the little 7-year-old girl being thrown into the pond? You know, that was edited out of her being thrown into the pond and dying in the original cut.
Yeah, I heard they had taken that out, but then later they put it back in. But yeah, that was a very poignant scene. I thought it was more of a turning point in the movie, because before that, you know, you almost grow to like the monster because you can understand his innocence and that he just wants to fit in. But then when he's having fun with a girl, but then he kills her unwittingly, of course. But then you realize how dangerous he is.
I liken this in so many ways to King Kong, because King Kong is someone that just doesn't understand and that's out of his environment. And we look at Frankenstein's monster. He too. I mean, he's struggling to figure out who he is, what his place is, what he's supposed to do. So he's picking flowers and throwing them in the water. He doesn't understand you're not supposed to do that with people as well. So throughout the film, we end up feeling sympathy for him.
Yes, most definitely. And so yeah, that I think that scene with the little girl is definitely a big part of the movie, and it wouldn't be the same without it.
In fact, that the producers were afraid that little girl would be too afraid of Boris Karloff in his makeup, that they were wondering how they're going to expose the girl to him without her freaking out. But when she saw him, she was excited, and she said, "Can I drive to the set with him?" Because they had to go on location to it. And he was just so elated that this little girl didn't find him grotesque.
Yeah, it's funny how you don't really know how kids will react. I mean, another little girl might have been scared of him, but it's good that this one wasn't. I mean, you know, some people you just know that this is what you see in Hollywood, you know.
And this movie was known for one of the first that would become a staple in the horror genre, and that being thunder and lightning at a castle scene. This is noted as the one that would set the standard going forward.
Yeah, when you're watching the movie now, you think that that's just a common thing, but yeah, for the people watching it back then, it was new, and it was so it was a lot scarier back then.
My grandfather saw this in the movie theater, and he relates. He which I think is funny. He said this is one of the films that helped him to learn English because he was an immigrant, and that's where they would go. They'd go see double features for a nickel on Saturdays. And he said this movie was so terrifying when it came out.
Yeah.
And I said, "But Pop, it's just like, how could you be afraid of it?" He goes, "Kid, you don't understand. There was nothing like this back then."
Yeah, exactly. And now they just, you know, like they satire it, like the Munsters. Herman Munster was the Frankenstein character.
Yeah, that's right. What about the part where Dr. Frankenstein yells, "It's alive! It's alive!" I mean, you want to talk about a classic line and talk about how it was used years later? I mean, look at Munsters was a spinoff of this distinct flat-top Frankenstein monster character, but also young Frankenstein. You could go on and on with the influence in pop culture of this creature.
Yes. And the classic line, "It's alive," was just, that was so cool back then. And you know, because it, like you said, it's a science fiction movie that he could actually create live. And also you have the, you know, there are lots of stage productions of this, and there was the one that had the two guys that played Sherlock Holmes, Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller.
Yes.
In their version of Frankenstein, which was was really neat to see.
Yeah, we ended up seeing that. Was it on Netflix or some streaming service? We watched it.
Yeah, we watched it streaming, I remember, and it was really cool. We saw the version where Cumberbatch played Frankenstein, the monster.
Mm-hmm. So this does translate very well to live performances.
There was also a line that got cut out where Victor said, "Henry, in the name of God," and Henry said, "In the name of God, now I know what it feels like to be God." So something controversial that they just couldn't have in a movie back then.
That's right, and they since, apparently over the years, they had different versions of how this was going to be reapplied because they couldn't find the original track. But since then, it has been reapplied, and when you listen closely, he's actually saying to be gods, plural.
That's interesting, yeah. So that it was originally filmed that way?
Yes. Now, the features of the creature, that is with the electrodes on his neck, the flat top, what we call the classic universal monster, that look has been copyrighted until 2026. I wonder what's going to happen afterwards.
I think they could renew the copyright if they wanted to, but yeah, if they don't, we'll see what happens. But even in on the stage play we talked about, they didn't use the same look for the monster. It was a more human look.
Yeah, they're not allowed to, which makes sense. And again, we'll refer back to the original novel. The original novel didn't have this look. And when you think about it, Mary Shelley was 19 years old when she wrote this. How awesome is that? She's considered the first person to ever write something that would branch out into the science fiction horror genre, and only at 19 years old. I mean, I give her so much credit.
She was a fantastic visionary.
Yes. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Reflecting on this movie, I never get tired of watching it. It's so rewatchable because there's so many nuances. Big thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Thank you so much for joining us.
Please continue to follow and interact with us on both Facebook and Twitter.
If you use Apple IIe, Commodore 64, or Tandy computers, find us on your bulletin board system. Your 5-star feedback is always welcome. Theme music provided by Checkpoint Charley.
Until next time, live long and may the Force be with you.
Nanu Nanu.